Vice President Dick Cheney, and National Security Advisor John Bolton. I welcome you in my talk show, Mr. David Wurmser.
Well, I'm happy to be with you.
Donald Trump's return to the White House is to reshape USA foreign policy and international relations?
Yeah, I think there will be quite a significant change. I mean, both in the region of the Middle East, the Sub-Indian continent, as well as toward international organizations and a repivoting toward Asia. So I think the impact will be significant.
David Wurmser, what do you think? What would you say about this? Donald Trump has a promise to end the war between the Israel and Hamas. What would you say?
What his policy is, and you'd have to look at his advisors to see what the real policy is behind the scene. And those are people that are familiar, people like Robert Greenway, Robert O'Brien, David Friedman, and so forth. And what you see is they want the war to end, but they want the war to end with an Israeli victory. So they're impatient with the Israeli war that isn't. They believe that the Biden administration held Israel back and stopped Israel from having decisive victory. So they will expect Israel in the next 3 months to become more aggressive and to actually strategically change the realities on the ground so that they will be able then to rely or make American power rest more on a regional alliance with, say, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Israel that is based on the defeat of Iran and its proxies. And that will allow the administration to have a much more stable and peaceful region. That's how they view it. So while they want the war to stop, they want Israel to win the war in a very expansive way first, and Iran to lose it.
What Donald Trump's win means for Ukraine, Middle East, and Iran?
I think that the incoming administration, the new administration, does not see Russia with quite the hostility that the current administration does. It does understand the stability of Europe, and as a result, I think it will still support Ukraine, but it'll be more cautious about it'll be in one way more cautious and less cautious. The more cautious will be they will give Ukraine less military aid and money without a strong accounting of where that money goes. But at the same time, they may believe that Ukraine has the freedom to act more to achieve a victory. It's somewhat similar to Israel. They will want to see, on some level, the Ukrainians stabilize their front enough through enough Ukrainian victory in order to allow Russia and Ukraine, therefore, to come to some sort of a ceasefire and a resolution. They very much expect Russia that they seek a way out of this, and they think that if Russia does not have the hope that it can win with Trump, that they can effect a ceasefire.
Mr. David, security policy expert and foreign policy expert you are, what would you say? Will USA withdraw from NATO?
No, I think it's a threat designed to actually strengthen NATO. The problem with NATO is that the Europeans have failed to rise to the occasion and contribute to the NATO alliance. Their defense budgets are tiny, between 1% and 2% at most, and their forces are really dropping back a generation of warfare and are far too small. And that places the burden on the United States and a few countries in NATO. So I think what President Trump is trying to do is to pressure NATO to perform as an alliance rather than to destroy NATO. The second thing is that the administration wants to detach NATO from the European Union sentiment. NATO is not the military arm of the European Union. It is an alliance with the West that includes countries that are not part of the European Union. And this administration sees European Union politics, specifically the politics of the European Parliament and so forth, as somewhat hostile. They very much supported, for example, Brexit from London to leave the European Union. So by detaching NATO from the European Union more, they believe they will strengthen NATO.
Mr. David, Trump can end the war between Ukraine and Russia?
I believe he can if he makes it clear that he's not abandoning Ukraine and continues to support Ukraine. That will erase any Russian hope that they now can go and destroy Ukraine, which is dangerous because that will encourage Russia to keep fighting. On the other hand, by supporting Ukraine in that way, Russia knows that it has a much more favorable government in Washington and will try to seek that to end this war. If its aspiration to destroy Ukraine remains off the table, then Russia will try to end this war and try to repair its relations to some extent with the West.
Mr. David, do you believe, I'm going to ask you this thing, Ukraine endangers whole of Europe in this to war with Russia?
The idea that Russia would have a belief that Ukraine is the battle for Europe, and that if Ukraine falls, Russia has a clear shot at casting a strong shadow over Europe, or even going further in places like Poland or Lithuania, is a very dangerous idea in Washington, in Moscow. And the idea that you saw Putin express in Valdai about creating sort of an anti-American bloc in the world, that is a concern even for the Trump people. But that said, they believe that some of that is a reaction to some of the excesses of things in Europe, and that they can convince Russia to drop that and deprioritize going to war in Europe. And with that, they can come to some sort of an arrangement to slowly begin walking Russia back from its more global aspirations as part of this Iranian-Chinese bloc that is emerging.
Mr. David, there are a lot of statements in favor of Putin and Russia and against China. There is a nexus, China and Russia. What would you say about this?
Well, I think that I'm very close to a lot of the people in the incoming Trump administration, but I do believe that there's a misperception that Russia is still operating under the same rules that it's operated for the last 20 years. I believe there's been a shift in Moscow that was expressed in Valdai in the October 5th speech, 2023, by Putin, that is a more aggressive global policy that aligns Russia with China more aggressively against the West. And I think this administration underestimates the danger of that. They think that they can take a tough line on China, but to some extent come to terms with Russia. I understand the aspiration to split Russia and China. And there may be some utility and there may be some ability to do that. But I think we don't fully appreciate, even the incoming administration doesn't yet fully appreciate this new defense concept that Putin has put forward. And I think that there will be some frustration and unhappiness in the incoming administration over realizing that. And where you see the rhetoric now may well change within the first year. It will be more accommodating to an agreement with Russia. It will definitely attempt to bring Russia back into a proper relationship with the West. But it will be limited in how it succeeds, and that will lead to, again, probably a better relationship, but not a good relationship.
Mr. David, your expertise on Arab-Israel relations always. What would you say? What's your remarks on this? Donald Trump said so many times, I'm anti-war, to end the Israel-Hamas war in Gaza and Israel-Hezbollah war in Lebanon. Solutions. It's an easy job for Donald Trump?
Again, I think that Donald Trump believes that just the very threat of American power will cause Hamas and Hezbollah to, to seek a solution and to stop the war, and then that will allow Israel to stop the war. But they aren't. I doubt that the Hamas, Hezbollah, and Iran can really do that and deliver on that stability. And so therefore, I think there will be disappointment. The second thing is that that's dependent on a perception of an Israeli victory and strength. So I think the next 3 months we'll see an escalation of war by Israel against its enemies to try to affect the fundamental strategic change, and they will find support from the Trump administration because there's a fundamental belief in the incoming administration that it is Israeli strength is a force for stability. So the more Israel defeats Hezbollah, which is seen to be profoundly an enemy of the United States by the Trump people, and Iran, which is also seen to be an enemy of the United States, the more Israel defeats them and strategically changes the momentum of the region against Iran, the happier this incoming administration will be, and will seek to use that